we had a really specific strategy from day one, which is we will go after the best guests and the best, highest quality people running the most interesting companies in the world.
Hello, everybody, to this episode of the Strategy Show. We are excited. We have Dan Murray, entrepreneur and host of the Entrepreneur podcast, Secret Leaders, #1 business podcast in the UK. #2 is Tim Ferriss, so you can imagine the context. Then we want to know, how did you do it in 4 years to get such a reach?
I think that's a good question. So my strategy, I mean, obviously, like most people, one of the things is timing. When we started 4 years ago, it wasn't quite as popular as it is now, as you might imagine. But actually, our strategy at the time, I do it with my friend Rich, who's a producer, and we had a really specific strategy from day one, which is we will go after the best guests and the best, highest quality people running the most interesting companies in the world. That logic dictates that you can't just do an episode every week. That doesn't really make sense. You have to, by the simple logic of trying to go after the best, do a less is more approach. And so we decided that we would do a first series of 15 episodes just as a MVP, so minimum viable product, and just see if it was a popular idea and if it worked. And we got some very good people as our first 15, of course, but we were both, running companies and had really good investors in our startup. So we had quite good access to good entrepreneurs in the first place. The first series sounded terrible and it was all rather unprofessional and we had no idea what we were doing. But we managed to get to the end with 15 episodes and we put it out there for free. And frankly, we had the brilliant response of getting 25,000 downloads. So we were quite happy to have 25,000 downloads as something that we had just put up on our Facebook and here and there. Like, it sort of just got some random organic reach. So from that, we decided we were going to professionalize. We were going to record it in a studio. We were going to keep sound quality and production quality incredibly high every single week. But we would stick to the same idea, which is 15 guests per series. We wouldn't do more than that, but we would start to do some live events. And by doing live events, you can start to build a bit of a community. So you can start to build people that feel like they get a special opportunity to go to stuff. And so if you fast forward 4 years, where we're at is we just finished our last series. The last episode had the founder of Deliveroo. It started with the founder of Slack and it finished with the founder of Deliveroo, just to give you like an idea of the kinds of amazing guests that we get on the show. And they were both inbound inquiries, by the way, which is the most cool thing ever. So we spent the first 2 or 3 series, lots of outreach all the time and people saying no all the time. And then the last series, we had people come to us and it was amazing. So we're like, wow.
You want to make your sales more repeatable and reliable? Do you want to have less volatility and more growth in your revenue per month? At Strategy Sprints, we do only one thing: strategy in sprints. Strategy means having more revenue through a better offer. In sprints means having more energy in your team every week. Check out if your ROI is as high as it is for most service-based and online businesses and startups we work with, which is over 100%. You can see it in just 15 minutes by going to strategysprints.com/sales and completing our online exercise to know what your ROI would be with our accelerator program. We are ready to sprint. Are you?
How did you do that? How did you get that tipping point?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So for me, the idea of differentiation that I had was, the way that I think about stuff always is how to build a community. So I was like, if we do live events, then what we can do is we can invite the guests to do something live. You can record it live, so it's extra content for the follow-up series, which is always a good thing. You can make the tickets exclusive to people that are customers of your podcast, that listen to your podcast, which drives the sort of engagement. And if you go even further, you can save 10 seats every single time for journalists. And if journalists write about it, then obviously you get a really good opportunity to get awareness in the right spaces. So that was really like the key part of the strategy, was less is more. Do 5 live events per series. In those 5 live events, aim to get a minimum of 10 guests, so at least 2 on every single live event. So the content's super unique, because you might hear the same founder on 2 podcasts, right? But you'll very rarely ever hear the same 2 different founders on the same podcast having a really interesting debate. That was far more our plan and strategy for how we approached it. And so I think the unique insight that I have for people is the name of the game is consistency. So at the end of the day, whatever you do, I think it's really important to communicate with your customers upfront what the plan is and how you're going to keep doing it. So like every start of the series, we're like, there's only 15 of these. This is it. These are the people that are in it. And then you communicate when you're done, and then you communicate when you're coming back. And I think that's like a very good thing, because people get an idea of that sense of, being part of the journey. It's worth saying though that I really believe in the power and medium of podcasting, and I think it's a super meaningful way of communicating. And to that point, I've got a LinkedIn article that I did, which is I don't know if you've seen it actually, but it's how we built the #1 podcast, a complete document. It took me a whole day to write. So it literally took me a day of it took me a whole day of writing to put together. And so I'd say honestly about 12 hours. But what it is every single series, how we started, what we did, what happened. So on my LinkedIn, I've done an article where I publish series by series how to create the #1 like business podcast, everything that we did step by step, all the partners we used, how much money it cost us, every single bit of equipment. So the links for the microphones, the links for the editing software, the links for absolutely everything. So if you were to do a step-by-step, series by series, you would have an idea. And I've also included who we pitched for sponsorship, how much they paid us, how much we then put into marketing and production, who we used for production, who we used for marketing, what the results were, the whole thing. It's like an incredibly comprehensive 25-minute read where anyone can literally go on and copy every single bit of it. It's essentially like trying to open source the IP.
Beautiful. So we'll put the PDF link in.
Yeah, please. Yeah, if you connect with me, Dan Murray-Serter, Serter, that's my wife's name, so we have an amalgamation name, on LinkedIn or Instagram or Twitter, then you'll find it there.
Beautiful. And what's next in your podcast? What's your business goal, your reach goal with it?
So, well, the idea was that I was going to be creating a 5th series and potentially doing video. So I was starting to investigate doing video and doing it really creatively and nicely. But since this has come up, we've actually changed tack completely. And instead, we're going to create a series called Leadership in a Time of Crisis. And to give you an idea, came up with the idea last week, pitched it to a couple of our guests, and we're doing an episode on Friday with the founder of Slack about how Slack are responding to the crisis. We're doing an episode the week after with the founder of Calm and Babylon. So that's the number one biggest mental health app in the world and number one biggest healthcare app in the world, and getting the founders of that two together talking about what they're seeing from the data and how they're approaching it. The week after, we've got the founder of a company called Koru Kids, which is the biggest kids and nanny service because they've just closed all the schools in the UK, talking to the founder of the biggest toy company for kids. Anyway, the point being, we're trying to put together this last minute series, like very quickly, but all recorded remotely, obviously, but bringing together people who are talking through in real time how they're handling a pandemic crisis, how it's going on for their sales. Sadly, we had the CEO of British Airways scheduled to be on Series 5, but obviously with this, he's had to decline, which is understandable. But it gives a good idea of sort of how we're trying to react very quickly to changing circumstances that I personally think are going to persevere for probably 3 to 6 months in society. So worthwhile buckling in and doing something about it now.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Dan, for being on our show. It was amazing, your generosity in sharing all these things. The PDF will be like a step-by-step guide for everybody who wants to start or is starting a podcast and wants to learn from the best or avoid some mistakes and speeding up the learning curve.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Dan.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
And have a great day in London and stay safe in these times of crisis.
You too as well, my friend. Thank you.
Bye then.
Bye-bye.
We all know that working in sprints is better, but how do we know what we should work on? You're in luck because we have a 15-minute exercise that will give you complete clarity on where to take your project next. Go to strategysprints.com/sales to complete our short exercise and meet one-on-one with an expert sprint coach to identify your number one bottleneck. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed that episode of The Strategy Show. Make sure to like this video below and subscribe so that you can stay up to date with every episode of The Strategy Show. Get daily CEO tips from CEOs for CEOs.